Authorize request for proposals for ambulance billing services. This was discussed at the March 7th Finance, Budget, and Personnel Committee meeting, but the vote was 2-2. So the full Common Council will be able to decide this evening without a recommendation from Finance, Budget, and Personnel. Steve.
Thank you. I'm going to keep my report kind of short because I think many of you know about this situation. It's been discussed now twice at Finance, Budget, and Personnel, and there have been other members of the council there, and I think some of you have reported seeing the video from the last meeting. But just kind of a high level, and also for people who might be watching at home, at the end of 2016, one of the two employees in the finance department that has been dealing with ambulance billing, a half-time person, indicated that she would be retiring. The other part of the ambulance billing is done by someone as half of their full-time job. So in other words, there's one FTE working on ambulance billing, and it's historically been divided among two people, one who is a half-time employee and the other who had other duties to make a full-time job. At the point that that individual indicated that she'd be leaving at the end of 2016, there was some discussion internally about looking at how to move forward, what the next step should be. We have been aware from the past that there are companies that do ambulance billing for communities across Wisconsin and beyond. So that came up as one of the options, along with two other alternatives. One, which is just to refill the halftime position and keep it as it is in finance. And another option that was raised was maybe refilling the position but transferring ambulance billing over to the fire department. So those were really the three alternatives. Two that would involve just rehiring, and a third one that would look at using another company to do the ambulance billing work. Subsequent to that, after the first discussion with Finance, Budget, and Personnel, the individual who was doing the other half-time work on the ambulance billing and also had treasury function work as well as part of her full-time job, tendered her resignation. So as it stands right now, we will not have ambulance billing staff after the end of this week. So the discussion continues, and it was brought up last week at the Finance, Budget, and Personnel Committee meeting. The same options that were put forth and discussed. And the staff was asking the committee to endorse moving forward with an RFP, request for proposals from qualified vendors for the ambulance billing service. And we're aware of roughly a half a dozen out there. There may be others who would potentially be interested. The committee deadlocked 2-2 in that conversation. One member was missing, so it does come to the council tonight with no recommendation. Just a few comments. Staff is continuing to recommend proceeding with an RFP, and really the gist of it from my perspective is that I think it's one of the alternatives that should be considered. No predisposition as to how it will end up, but we're at a point right now where I think we've got an opportunity to look at all options, including rehiring and including outsourcing, if you will. And I think that due diligence suggests that that makes sense. Now, ultimately, the council may look at this and say, you know what, we're persuaded for a variety of reasons, cost and otherwise, to go with rehiring. But staff continues to believe that it makes some sense to look at seeking proposals from qualified companies. Some of the reasons are that contract billing firms have specialized legal and compliance staff. You know, things like HIPAA and those types of things are increasingly complicated. And they have a broad base of expertise in various areas of EMS. They have trained professionals who do this on an ongoing basis. But clearly it's the council's decision what to do moving forward. And Keith is not here tonight. As I said earlier, he has a family medical issue he's dealing with. But Jen and Scott are back there. They were part of the team as well. And any of us, including me, would be willing to try to answer any questions you might have about the proposal that's being made.
Questions? Motions? Mr. Earl.
Motion to approve.
Motion to direct staff to solicit ambulance billing proposals through RFP. Second by Fire. Discussion. Mr. Zaleski.
So I'd like to make an amendment to that motion. And the amendment is that the City of Marshfield Finance Department is a mandatory participant in that RFP.
Okay, that's a motion. Is there a second to that amendment? A second. I think we're going to need a lot of clarity on how you're going to do that without a conflict of interest.
So do I.
Well, I mean, what you're asking me? So, I mean,
they're submitting the RFP. They can't also be a bidder for it. You can't bid on your own RFP. That's a
one avenue, perhaps, is a committee, or a group of folks that would that would help through that process.
Go ahead, Steve.
I think an alternative that I might suggest, and maybe it's what you're getting at, is that when this comes back, that there be a full full-blown proposal showing very clearly how it could be done in-house, what the cost would be, what the benefits would be to compare to the outside vendors' proposals. I don't know if it would be truly a proposal because, as Chris just said, I mean, we'd kind of be acting in two roles at that point as a city. But we could certainly do the same thing to show what it would look like so that you know full well what the best road is when you look at the different options.
So we do have a motion and a second to amend the motion on the floor. That motion to amend was to require the City of Marshfield's Finance Department to participate in this RFP as a potential selected entity to provide this service. We have a motion, a second discussion on that specific motion to amend, and then we'll vote on that. Mr. Hendler?
I'll withdraw my second in lieu of what was just said.
Yeah, you can't withdraw a second. We have a motion and a second. You can vote against it. You can argue against it.
Okay.
You have your First Amendment right to do any of those things. Mr. Whitson.
I would further like to be sure that when the Finance Department puts together some level of proposal for the cost, that we look at real numbers, not budgeted numbers. There was some discussion a week ago of a very high budget, which included some expenses that were either not realized or included write-offs. And I would like to see actual costs based on last year's expenses, both from a personnel standpoint, being the wages and benefits, as well as the miscellaneous other expenses, software expense, rent expense, office expenses, those types of things. I'd like to see all that. If the city or finance department would also like to put together a worst-case scenario to compare it to, kind of a, if we were going to restaff and max it out to the full benefit package as a secondary number, that would be fine, but I would really like to see actualized, realized expenses based on last year's.
Okay, they're going to be surprised.
Did we have a vote on the amendment yet?
No.
I'm sorry. It's Sudafed, I swear. All right, so we have a motion, a second to amend the motion on the floor. Is everybody clear on the motion to amend?
I am not clear.
The motion that we're voting on right now would add the requirement that the City of Marshfield participate in the bidding process for ambulance billing services. We had a second. It was attempted to be withdrawn. We cannot do that. Steve had pointed out that, and I pointed out that there's a bit of a conflict there, and Steve had suggested potentially looking at doing a comparison, putting together a cost estimate for what it costs the City of Marshfield to do that. Mr. Witzel added that it should include actual numbers from last year's budget rather than projected numbers that were budgeted for this year. So voting yes on this question would mean that we are going to require the city to participate in this. If we say no, we will present you with the information that Steve suggested as a side-by-side analysis of our cost compared to the proposed RFPs. Clear as mud? Mm-hmm. All right. Let's use the voting board to vote on the amendment. Please vote. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Wagner?
Yeah. I don't know. I'm a little conflicted with this. In some regards, I think Mr. Zaleski's proposal makes some sense as to get some numbers. But the problem I have with it is, number one is we already got some numbers, and apparently the finance committee didn't feel comfortable with those numbers at all. And now they're asking for basically the same thing, and I wonder if they're going to feel any more comfortable with the numbers they get there. The second thing is, I really don't want to send this thing out for bid. I want to keep it in. My goal is to keep it in-house. And the problem that I have with Mr. Zaleski's amendment is that it puts it out for bid. I think it makes some sense to have the city give us more numbers, or to. I know what you were trying to do. But it sort of goes against the grain of me wanting to put it out for bid. So I'm probably going to vote against that. Probably.
Ms. Gross?
What's an RFP?
Okay, so my objective is for this to go out to RFP. However, I'm not sure about this amendment either because I don't like the conflict of interest of them. So, I'm trying to figure out how to vote here.
So here would be my concern. Everything we're talking about right now is public information. If you're a company determining whether or not you want to submit an RFP to us after we release this, and you know that we're going to be writing our own RFP from our own finance department, and that some of us have said we don't want to outsource, we want to keep this internal, how likely are you to submit a bid? Not likely. And I think that's my biggest concern right now, is that we're hurting ourselves in this RFP process by dragging this out.
When you do a request for proposal, you always indicate that you reserve the right to reject any or all bids, any or all proposals. We could receive 10 and reject 10. What you're making very clear to me is that you want to see a side-by-side, and you can certainly factor in anything you want to see. I think I take Mr. Witzel's comments about actual numbers, to heart. Whatever else you want to see in that side-by-side comparison, so that you can look at the best proposal you get from an outside vendor and compare it with what it would cost and what it would serve in terms of benefits to us to hire and keep it in-house and make your best judgment. Ultimately, we owe nothing to the companies that have bid or made proposals. But I agree with what the mayor was saying. I just can't imagine that it would be the finance department putting in a proposal competing with outside vendors in an RFP submitted by the city of Marshfield.
I suspect that any proposal put in by the finance department would have to be approved by the finance committee in open session prior to the bids being submitted, which kind of negates that process as well. Mr. Zaleski.
So in an effort to get us to a vote on this issue, which I think is the most important thing we should be talking about tonight, I'm willing to withdraw my motion to amend.
We've already got a second. So
okay,
the
well then let's vote.
We need to vote on the motion, Mr. Witzel.
Yeah.
Just for clarification, the vote we're about to take is on the amendment. It has nothing to do with the actual RFP. Correct. It's simply whether we want to amend that RFP.
The vote right now, yes, you want the city to participate as a bidder. No, you do not. Voted. Any other questions?
No.
Please vote. Motion passes. Mr. Earl? Motion fails. I apologize. 1-9. The motion then remains to direct staff to solicit ambulance billing proposals through an RFP process.
Motion. Did we have a motion?
That's a motion, yep. We already have a motion and a second. Yep.
Okay.
Discussion, Mr. Witzel.
A couple of questions, and of course, anybody who listened to me rant or ramble on last week, I apologize. I was a little bit long-winded. Just a couple of areas of clarification and question that I have at this point. One question I'm wondering, and I don't understand for sure exactly how this works, but I'm not really clear on when or what prompts discussions for or decisions to generate an RFP. So what I guess I'm getting at is recently we've talked about a building inspector position. We've also talked about grounds specialists. We actually have, I think, Carlson Detman looking at how that fits into a pay scale. And I'm wondering, when does the city decide, this is something we should outsource versus this is something we want to keep in-house? Because there doesn't seem to be a complete rhyme or reason in my mind.
I wouldn't say that this was a planned event. I mean, I think that there has been talk in the past that this is one of the services that we could secure from an outside source if and when we chose to. And we had a 30-year employee who had been doing a lot of this work, so it was kind of a moot point for quite a while. I don't know as if I'd say that we have other targeted functions that when person X resigns, we look at outsourcing. But this is one of those that has been a growing thing across Wisconsin. These companies have been securing accounts with more and more communities, and it just came onto our radar as one that was worth at least investigating.
Mr. Hendler.
Yeah. Steve, what I would like to request from you and your staff is what has the city to this point outsourced already? How many different things have we done for outsourcing? You don't have to answer me now, but I think at a future meeting, I would like you to comment on that.
Yeah, I mean, and the question is, do we outsource the full operation? One good example, I think, is engineering, where we have staff that does a lot of the work regarding design of infrastructure and those types of things, and yet we use MSA professional services and others regularly to do project design that either we don't have time for or is at a skill level perhaps that we need outside assistance. But that's not a job that's been parceled off, if you will. So I can certainly look at that for you.
Well, I think it would make a lot of sense, in understanding the entire question of outsourcing. We sometimes may not have the staff, we may not have the technology for it. There are a lot of good reasons, I think, for doing some of those things. So if you could provide us with such items that you just mentioned and perhaps a few more, I mean,
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay.
Mr. Witzel.
A couple more clarifying questions or questions that I have. According to the RFP, page 4, section 2, part A, number 1, contractor will be handling the processing of payments, adding additional concerns when working with residents who receive transportation services. They're going to be doing the payment processing as well. So is this then going to eliminate additional positions, people that are currently taking payments?
Can you
or
give me
processing
that citation reference again?
Page 4.
Oh, page 4. Oh,
Of the RFP.
Okay.
Section 2, under scope of work.
Okay. Processing ambulance billing. Okay, now could you repeat your question? I
All right,
apologize. I
so
was wandering.
processing ambulance billing, insurance claims, account receivable, and suitable collections methods. The process should include handling of patient information, exchange, quality control. And it says processing payments. Now, what we've talked thus far about is billing.
Yeah.
Strictly the statements come in, entered into software, bill goes out. This also includes payment, which I can understand kind of fits hand to hand, but we haven't talked about staff who are currently involved in the billing process, or the payment collection process, and what staff impact is that part of the RFP going to have?
Okay, I'm looking out at Scott and Jen as I say this, but I think that what's referred to in that section is all pretty much self-contained to ambulance billing, is it not? Is there anything that overlaps into other areas that you're aware of?
So to maybe clarify that, our cashiers who take payments face-to-face, for the people who do still come and pay face-to-face, take payments for a lot of things other than ambulance billing. I don't have the specific numbers, but I would guess that ambulance billing is a very small percentage of the payments they're taking in. They take in all the tax revenues, animal licensing, any type of payment to the city outside of ambulance billing. So it would be
And some of that's
small
very
percentage.
seasonal, and I understand that there are people who fill in extra to boost the seasonal times. I think there's somebody who's filling in extra right now during the dog licensing. So on the not boosted up, off-season, if you will, time, I would imagine there'd be some level of impact.
In other words, are we affecting other employment in the city?
You don't
Yep.
know.
The need for other employment? I wouldn't guess not measurably, but I don't know that offhand. I'm getting the look from there that's a fair statement.
Can I continue? Okay. One of the reasons for the RFP, if I understand, as it was described to us originally, was concern about timely billing. And yet, page 6 of the RFP, section 3, part C, number 1, the city will submit to the contractor by mail, fax and electronic mail a run sheet. So right there specified by mail, it concerns me that we're going to be drastically potentially slowing the process as these things are sent by mail to an entity that's going to be
Let's clarify that, 'cause
processing
I don't think
it.
that's a correct interpretation.
Well, yeah, I mean, it says by mail, fax, or electronic mail, and I'm guessing that the faster means are what we use to transmit that. Now, we have to be careful. There's HIPAA information, those kind of things. We've adapted a new, we've got a new software of encrypted emails to make sure that that kind of information is safe, so it's only opened by the recipient who's supposed to get it. But I would suspect that email is the main form used. Why it suggests mail on there, maybe that's a historic wording, but we're not.
It contradicts one of the reasons.
No, I know, I hear you, but I get the concern. But believe me, those are sent by a higher means than snail mail, I think.
Well, it'd be nice to have that specifically identified.
Okay.
I guess just to summarize, I think my opposition to this is pretty clear. We have incredible transportation provided by fire and rescue. I don't think anybody can argue with that. It seems as though there are at times many different outlying entities that want to get in on that. I personally feel that billing is a part of that service that should continue to stay in-house. I'm concerned about the level of service as this gets potentially outsourced. Speaking with a resident recently who was commenting on the meeting a week ago, and she has seen some outsource of billing from another entity within the city. and the level of service has greatly reduced. She's very concerned. She finds actually that the service to the local people is appalling. So that is a level of concern, again, a reason why I'm opposed to an RFP. I just really think that this needs to stay in-house. I don't really think that an RFP is the right solution, and I really don't believe that a lot of the concerns that have been brought up are to be realized at this point. I think what we have in place is fine. So,
Ms. Spiros?
What I've always understood an RFP to be is a request for proposal. You're just looking for information.
Correct.
Am I correct on
Correct.
that?
That is
Or
correct.
did I
Correct.
lose
Exactly what
something
it is.
Okay.
in the interpretation?
correct. No, you're correct. It's soliciting
we're
proposals.
just looking for some numbers. We're not making a decision. We're not picking anybody. We haven't made that decision until we see some numbers.
That is correct.
And quite frankly, and I think Mr. Witzel has made this comment at previous meetings, customer service is an important issue. So as we interview the top firms, I think some checking on references, and if we get to that point where we're serious about them, on their customer service history would be one of the essential questions, if we end up that far down the road.
And then I'm curious, too, and I don't know if Tom is comfortable answering this question, but did the person who complained, did they say what sort of billing they were talking about? What are they talking about?
hospital billing?
Oh,
That's not done by the city.
No.
no.
Mr. Hendler, you had your hand up next.
Yeah, I forgot what I was going to say.
Your opportunity.
I know.
Amendment.
No, but I'll skip it. I'll withdraw.
Mr. Wade.
Can I withdraw that?
I've heard this argument. Let's just go ahead. Let's just go get some numbers. We don't know what we're talking about until the proposals come in, and then we can decide what we're doing about it. God, I have been on this council so long, and I've fallen for that so many times, because I do believe that, even in the RFP, the amended RFP, you had the schedule that you're going to, it goes out, if we approve it tonight, it goes out tomorrow, and on April 25th, the council approves it. That's what you got in your schedule. There's very little time for debate once those things come back in. I think they go to the, I think the schedule says it goes to the Finance Committee again on April 18th. So this whole thing is moving forward. And as the many years that I've been here, we've done this thing where, let's just go out and see what we can get. Well, let's have an architect draw up and see how much it would cost to build this building. Let's see about how this library, this fire station, whatever.
And we built
And the next thing we know, we come back and say, well, it's going to cost this much money. And we say, oh, God, we don't want to do that. Say, oh, my God, you just spent $100,000 of the taxpayers' money on an architect. You're really going to waste that money? And we're going to hear the same thing. We're going to hear the same thing on April 8th. We're going to hear, the staff went through all this trouble to prepare this RFP, and they took all this time to review it, and all these people that gave us in good faith the RFPs, and you're going to turn them down now after all this? Been there, done that. This is what happens. This whole process has bothered me in the sense that it came to a crisis point. It came to us in a crisis point. And I know that I think the decision as to whether we should seek going out for proposals itself should have been made some time ago, before we actually came to the point of saying we've got to do it tonight or it's not going to happen at all. The other thing, it was sort of ironic in today's City Hall email, and we get a lot of spam in that email. This is an interesting one. This is by Library Systems and Services, and it's just as local governments use outside firms for trash and snow removal, they're increasingly turning to the private sector for library operations. Really? I don't think, there is no way we would ever even consider doing something like this. And we won't. But that outsourcing is becoming so commonplace now that even services like library are being outsourced. Even services like managing libraries for cities is being outsourced. If we really hold on to our principle that we don't want to compete with the private sector, then maybe our own ambulance service maybe you'd want to bid out our own ambulance service. We got a good one, right? But hey, if the private sector can do it cheaper and better, why are we taking business away from them, right? Of course, we'd never do that either. And by the way, about a month ago, the Fire and Police Commission stood up here and said, "Oh, by the way, gang, we're negotiating with Marshfield Clinic to provide a replacement for the Spirit ambulance service that was provided by St. Joe's." We're sort of stepping into the private sector there, aren't we? There's no consistency here. There is no compelling reason other than the fact that it turned into a crisis situation with a retirement that they knew about back in December and somebody else leaving. There's no compelling reason other than we don't have anybody else trained at the moment. And I think it's incumbent upon us. We could very easily train somebody and continue as we are. And we could even hire somebody else for it. So I'm not going to vote for this thing going out for RFPs. I've been down this road before. I don't like it very much. And I'm not going to let it happen to me again. Thank you.
Ms. Fennick?
I'm actually going to echo Mr. Wagner's statements in that my concern is, as was at the Finance Committee, is that when we go down the road of RFP, we're even that much farther down the road of not hiring someone to replace. And so it almost becomes, as Mr. Wagner said, a crisis situation where we just have to go with this RFP because they're ready and they're trained, and we don't have to hire somebody and wait 6 months or 8 months to get them into the department and get them trained. And so that's my concern with waiting. I don't think we should go out for an RFP on this service. I think we should keep it local, and I think it's important to do that for our citizens.
Other discussion, Mr. Zaleski.
So, Mr. Barg, maybe you can speak to what is the plan in the Finance Department for the next 30, 60 days? And it looks like that's what we have left from the time that submissions are due till decisions are made. If we don't keep it here like a lot of us think we do, even before that, what's the plan for the next 60 days?
Are you talking about ambulance billing?
Ambulance billing. What's the plan?
Well, I'd prefer to defer to the finance director. I see that Scott Owen, the interim fire chief, is coming to the podium. Maybe he'll comment on that. I mean, we've talked about some options. Obviously, there's going to be a need to try and look at possibly some temporary help. Scott?
Yeah, because ambulance billing is so specialized, the plan right now, come probably Friday or Monday, kind of depending on talking with Keith, those ambulance reports and bills are going to sit dormant in our station. They're going to be under lock and key. We run 200 to 230 ambulance calls a month, averaging $150,000, $200,000 a month. We can't just hand it off to the firefighters and say, here, bill this. It's way too complex. We can't go to someone who does billing at Security Health because they're not specialized in the ambulance portion. Ambulance is a totally different beast from the hospitals, the clinics. So until we get some resolvement on this, whether it is going out for RFPs, whether it's doing it in-house, we're going to sit on those bills and see what happens. I've talked to the finance director briefly about this, and I really do wish he was here tonight, but I do understand, family emergencies and stuff. But that's kind of where they're going to sit right now until we come up with a better plan.
Ms. Spiros.
So a follow-up question to that. So if we hired a company who knows what they're doing and has experience in ambulance billing and all the ICD 9 or 10 codes or whatever you use, because it is very complicated. It takes a long time to become a certified coder. I know this for a fact because my sister is a certified coder. So looking at this billing, I understand it. And in fact, I have my own example from people who are very experienced as submitting the proper codes. This personally happened to me. The improper code was submitted for a test I needed, and now I'm going through an appeal with my own insurance company. And this was by people who are perfectly qualified to submit these correctly and have been trained for a long time. So I guess I'm looking at as if we hire a professional company, they're going to be able to jump in, they're going to be able to catch us up much quicker than if we hire somebody who has absolutely no experience. We have to send them through training. So they're going to be, number one, new to the city, new to all the city policies and procedures, new to our computer system, and then they're going to be playing catch up in learning a brand new thing. I feel like we are undervaluing the expertise it takes to do ambulance billing. It isn't just something that you're going to hire somebody and they're going to know how to do it in 3 8-hour training sessions.
That is correct.
Mr. Hendler.
Yeah, I just remembered.
Figured. I wanted to get to you right away.
That's why. You know, should the RFPs go out, and the council favors that, once they come back, I would like to recommend that the chairman or somebody from the Finance and Budget Committee sit in on the evaluation.
We can do that. Yeah, we can do that.
You know, I'd really like to see that, because that would increase the educational process.
We can certainly do that. It's a good idea. Mr. Witzel.
In response to Ms. Spiros's comments, quick question. Current ambulance billing, do we have certified coders?
Who are you directing your question to?
Do we have certified coders who are doing ambulance billing?
On staff?
On staff.
No,
The only person we have that even works in ambulance billing is leaving on Friday, so the answer is effectively no.
So, but have we had certified coders doing ambulance billing?
They've gone to certification classes, yes, in order to learn how to do. That's something that we.
So they are certified.
We have funded.
I see what you mean. Yeah.
I believe the answer is yes.
Yes. The people who've been doing it.
They are certified
that's
coders.
That's a budget.
It was my understanding they were not certified coders. They were not required to be certified coders. They were interested in becoming certified coders, but were not provided the opportunity, if I'm understanding.
Correct.
Correct. They are not certified. They have been to various training sessions, either around here or Minnesota for ambulance billing specialties.
And so it's not required.
Not currently.
It's not currently in place. And as I had mentioned a week ago, there are entities that provide certification, training, and testing. The organization Marshfield Clinic uses, I can't remember for sure, I think it was AAPR, provides certification options for $2,500, which is quite reasonable, I would think, if that was the route we had to go, which, of course, again, is not required right now. The other question or the other concern I have is that as I brought this up a week ago, and I questioned whether or not we were going to have staff who are currently employed be cross-trained on entering the bills, which the process takes, I believe, about 30 seconds when all of the information is accurate from the fire department. I asked specifically, will there be cross-training to cover in the interim? I was told, no, we don't have enough people, we're too busy with other things. So I guess there does not seem to be a priority in the finance department to get this taken care of, and that's a big concern of mine because, again, here we sit with hundreds of thousands of dollars per month sitting on a shelf because we're, A, unwilling to cross-train, even though we have a person who is doing a great job, who has been a great asset, who has been a employee of the city for 20 years, who is going to be resigning on Friday, and could potentially help train that. We have not taken advantage of the opportunity to get some cross-training in to get that resolved.
So let me clarify a bunch of inconsistency with what was just said, because that's not fair. 4 people involved in ambulance billing in the city of Marshfield. 2 in finance, 2 in the fire department. Chief Haight was one of them.
Yep.
2 people resign in finance. Chief Haight retires. 3 people in 1 month leave, trained in the same job. There's no way you plan for contingency. You don't have 5 times redundancy in place in any organization in order to handle that. The criticism of staff is unjust and not correct. We have a long history in this community, in this council, of doing RFPs. We started that in about 2006 when this council, during budget time, eliminated a position in the 11th hour without any research whatsoever in engineering. We saved about $100,000 doing that. The next year we spent $170,000 outsourcing that job. 2 years later, not surprisingly, we stopped outsourcing and brought that position back into the city. Every single position that opens up in the city should absolutely be evaluated with all potential options put on the table. Failure to do that is a failure for us to do our jobs. I just don't see how it's not. We need to evaluate all options before we move on and make a decision. Mr. Jokic, you've been waiting.
We are looking at going out for an RFP. That's all. We do this all the time we request for proposal to evaluate what our options are. That's what we're doing. That's what we're being asked to do. It is this council's responsibility to say yay or nay based on the information we get. If we don't do our job, that's our fault. And by the way, I think tonight in the finance minutes, we approved the hiring of an outside firm to do the assessing. That probably affects more people than ambulance billing.
Absolutely.
I would expect that, and I don't recall this much discussion on that department, and that again was precipitated by a longtime city employee retiring. This just makes sense to go out for RFP. Do it. We're not committing ourselves to anything. And if we just follow along and just go along with it, that's our responsibility, and that's us not doing our job. This is ridiculous
Ms.
for
Spiros?
this long a discussion.
I just want to follow up on Chris's comments. That's correct. There's been times when I've been frustrated and things have been presented to us, and I felt like this is kind of getting presented to us at the last minute, and do we really actually have a choice here? But we always do have a choice. We can always vote no. If we haven't done that in the past, that's on us, because we have that option. So I agree with Chris on that point. But back to the point of certified coders, non-certified coders, people doing the job, not doing the job. It's true. We have not had certified coders, but the rules change every single day in healthcare. And certified coders keep up with that. They go to classes, they belong to certified coding groups, they get emails, they follow and they keep up with the trending. Somebody who is not certified is less likely to do that, number one. Number two, I don't know how long it takes to become a certified coder, but it takes a long time. It's not done in a week. It's not done in 2 weeks. It takes months and months, if not closer to a year, to become a certified coder. So it's not something that's done easily. So the thought process that we have somebody who is resigning on Friday who could potentially train somebody before then to take over this position, to me, is ridiculous. Nobody is going to learn that job. Even a certified coder wouldn't come in and learn that job in the 3 remaining days of this week. It just wouldn't happen. So as far as having a backup plan, if we hire a professional organization and the person who typically handles our accounts is sick for a month, they will have resources within their company to continue doing our billing like it will never miss a beat. You won't even know.
Mr. Bark.
Yeah, thank you. I've learned along the way some of the answers to some of these questions about how ambulance billing occurs. And even when, Tom, when you're asking me questions, I'm looking at you sometimes like I hope I'm right, and I'm glancing out at Scott or Jen, to make sure that I'm giving the right information, and maybe I'm not always correct. So I've been learning as I go. But I know this. Every single year when I stand at the podium where Scott is, and I do the budget presentation, I know that there's going to be people out there, they're going to hear about the budget, they're going to say, oh my gosh, taxes went up another 0.75% or whatever, and, where's the relief? Is the city looking at all options? For crying out loud, somebody leaves, you just refill them. Do you need that job? Do you even verify that that person is still needed, or can other people do the work and get it done some other way? I think the public expects, in our due diligence, that we look at the options. We know for a fact that there are many communities across Wisconsin, a growing number, that doesn't mean they're all right, but a growing number, who are having outside companies do their ambulance billing and collections. Is that right for Marshfield? I don't know. But from the first moment I've heard this suggestion being made by the team that involved Keith and Jen and Scott and others, I grabbed onto it and thought, yeah, the public would expect us to look at the options. If we ultimately end up hiring a city employee, if you want to take this timetable that you referenced and said it's too tight and build a little bit more time into it, let's do it. If you want to build in the idea that there be a finance, budget, and personnel committee person sitting in the room during the evaluation or anything else, let's do it. But why would we actually not, at this decision point, be able to tell the public, yes, before we went out and hired more staff, which means more benefits, which means more all these other things, we looked at it and we compared it to what the private sector can do, and we said, doggone it, we want another employee. That's fine. But how can we tell them we haven't even looked at it? That's appalling. It's absolutely an appalling thought to me. I'm sorry. There's no other way I can say it. And I respect the people we've had doing this job for the years. They've done Kathy and Joanne have done a marvelous job. It's no disrespect to their work at all or the value of what they've done. It's simply a decision point where I think we have to look at all the alternatives.
Mr. Earl.
From all the discussion, I think minds are pretty well made up as to who's going to go where. I'm going to call the question.
Thank you.
All those in favor of calling the question, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
2 noes. Motion carries. Please vote.
What are we voting on
The
exactly?
motion is to
Repeat
direct,
motion.
the motion is to direct staff to solicit ambulance billing proposals through an RFP. The amendment failed. 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. We're missing a vote. 1, 2, 3. Oh, no, 6 to 4. I just can't count. Motion passes 6 to 4.